Is it possible for him to make a comeback and to redeem himself? There are basically 5 things, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that Giacomo needs to do to redeem himself, and here they are. So the whole music internet universe has gone pretty crazy over the last couple of weeks over Giacomo Turra. I'm not going to go into details. If you're watching this, you probably already know who he is and why it's worth talking about him, or maybe not worth talking about him. But lots of people piled on, myself included, made a satirical video kind of mocking Giacomo's situation, because after all, he's a public persona. He's got 700,000 or 800,000 followers on Instagram. He's a heavyweight in the space of guitar players, musicians on social media. And so when you foul up with pretty questionable behavior, as he did, you should expect people are going to have things to say about it. I choose not to go full on with negative energy. I just think that's a bad feeling, a bad look. I don't like that. But satire is always appropriate. And so I'm here today not to continue in that vein, but rather to follow my own advice in other situations where I've told people, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And so I go back to what I saw at the end of Rick Beato's video on the topic, where he asked the question, is it possible for Giacomo to redeem himself and to come back from all of this? And he says, yes, I think so, because people like a good redemption story. And I agree with that. So I'm here today not as a musician talking about my own music or anyone else's music, but as someone who works in public relations and reputation management, because after all, that's what enables me to have the good fortune to go into the studio and work with people like Lawrence Juber and Fernando Perdomo and Matt Lebowski and Dan Feisley and Terry Branham, etc. All those wonderful musicians that have been a part of the tracks that I've made. But I work in the world of politics and with some very public people, heads of state, other elected officials, and oftentimes those people mess up, perhaps in much worse ways than Giacomo did, and they've got to try to restore the reputation in the eyes of the public, in the eyes of the people who voted for them. In the case of Giacomo, that would be all of the supporters, the music community, guitar players who have been following his work. So is it possible for him to make a comeback and to redeem himself? I think the answer is definitely yes. May not be to come back exactly as the man that he was, because now there's questions about his technical skill and all the issue of miming and all of that. I'm not going to get into all of that. I'm just going to talk about Giacomo as a public face of the music community, of music performers, and someone who has a platform and has obviously been very skilled at getting people to listen to what he does and take an interest in music that he promotes. The fact that he took music from other people without properly crediting them, that's part of the problem, and that's part of the items for which he needs to atone. So I think there are basically 5 things, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that Giacomo needs to do to redeem himself, and here they are. The first thing is he's got to come out with a proper apology. He's got to come out and clearly and unequivocally state, I took these people's creations without properly crediting them, and for that I'm sorry and I ask for their forgiveness. And if there's one thing I really learned from this whole episode, is that the music community and musicians in general are a very forgiving bunch. And I think it's really admirable when I compare that to people in politics who are extremely not forgiving. Musicians, even those who were wronged most egregiously by Giacomo, were more than happy to say, I don't wish him any harm, but this is really wrong what he did, and I would like to be, this to be rectified. So I think there's fertile ground for him to make a comeback on that, but it's got to be sincere. You can't fake your way through that. And so the little apology I think that he put out, I'm not sure if it's even still online. I think it was on YouTube, and he deleted his YouTube channel apparently. I'm not up to date on all of that stuff, but clearly it wasn't enough. He's got to come out with an apology that specifically says, I was wrong. I took from these people. I stole their solos. I tried to profit off of their efforts and their skills, and that was wrong. And for that, I apologize, and I ask the forgiveness of these people. And here are the names of the people. And he needs to name them one by one, every single one of them. Even if the video goes on for 20 minutes, he's got to do that. He's got to show. It's got to be like one of those memorial things where they list the names of every single person. Giacomo has got to do that because he has to show that he's not just faking his way through it, that he's cognizant of what he did wrong and the people who he wronged. So I think that would be the first thing. Second thing he needs to do is clarify whatever allegations are out there about his supposedly dishonorable behavior with gear providers. So apparently there were some guitar companies who had sent him instruments on the condition that he would use them in a certain number of videos, and that would be compensation for receiving the instrument. And apparently he didn't quite live up to his side of the bargain in those instances. I don't know all the details of that. A lot of times in these situations, people like to pile on when the person's already in trouble. Whatever it is, it would be very much in Giacomo's interest to set things right with anyone who has provided him gear. I know he lost some of his sponsorships. Maybe one day he can get those back. But for the people who are saying Giacomo took our instruments and didn't do what he said he would do as a compensation, he needs to set that right. So that would be, again, coming out and saying, I have been happy to use the instruments made by these luthiers, et cetera, and if those videos were not made, he would be wise to just pay them money for the value of the instruments and say, I'm happy to have purchased these instruments. I encourage other people to do the same. Giacomo, clear it out. Don't leave any room for ambiguity of people saying you stole or you didn't steal. Just pay the money and say, whatever went wrong there, I apologize, I paid for the instruments. End the discussion of it. That would be the second thing. The third thing that Giacomo would need to do, I would advise him to do, would be to contact each of those individuals from whom he took solos without properly crediting them, reach out to them individually and privately and say, I want to set this right with you. I would like to make a video with you where you play that solo and you talk about that solo and you talk about yourself as a player, as a composer, as a soloist, as a guitarist, whatever, and let's use my platform and my fame to bring more attention to the great music that you made that I recognized by copying it, perhaps stealing it, but didn't properly credit you. Now I want to go further than just crediting it. I want to feature you. So he should spend a few months touring around, meeting with every single one of those players, making videos with them, and showing their skills and teaching people what great musicians they were and why they inspired him to make music. That would be the third thing he needs to do. Those ones are more symbolic in nature. Now we come to the nuts and bolts of it, which is, what about the money? Because there's money involved. Giacomo profited off of these people. So the first one is obvious. The fourth thing he needs to do is quite obvious. Whatever he needs to open up his books, whatever revenue he obtained from selling tabs of solos that he did not author himself need to be 100% turned over to whoever was responsible for creating those parts. That should be done publicly and very, very transparently. Okay? Then the fifth thing he needs to do is even more complicated. All of this is trackable. How many followers you obtain from a certain video. So what Giacomo would be wise to do, if he wants to redeem himself, he wants to clear his reputation, show people he's serious about making things right with people, he would have to go in there, identify each one of the videos in which he played someone else's solo without properly crediting them, identify how many followers he obtained from that video, and therefore a share of his enterprise. So if he has 800,000 followers, and even if, 5,000, 10,000 of them were obtained through those videos, those people would then have a share of Giacomo's entire enterprise. They would own a piece of him. So if he makes $10,000 a month, and those content creators are responsible for 5% of the number of followers that he's achieved, then he's gained, then they should be entitled to that share of his revenue. Now, okay, people say that's kind of pushing it too far. Well, the alternative is to stay with a horrible reputation, hiding out, deleting your channel, and have people just endlessly critiquing you and name-calling and questioning your character. Giacomo, if you want to set it right, those are the 5 things you need to do. You need to publicly apologize in a meaningful way. You need to set things right with the gear providers who are claiming that you behave dishonorably with them. You need to personally meet with each of the people who played solos that you didn't properly credit and stole. You need to compensate all of the earnings you made from selling transcriptions of those. And then you need to figure out a way to share your profits with people whose works enabled you to gain more fame. So those would be the 5 things I think Giacomo would need to do. Giacomo, if you want help from somebody who's worked in public relations and reputation management, reach out to me. I'm happy to help because I've been really impressed by the way that all the people in the music community have been actually positive about all of this, saying I don't wish any harm on him, but what he did was wrong. Everybody can make a comeback. Anybody can redeem themselves. As the best stories in the world are stories of redemption. Giacomo, if you want to do it, that's what you got to do. Go for it.